Welcome to Techno Day and don't box yourself in. Let's start with who I am. If you've paid attention to any of the promotions, if you've seen my resume, on paper, I'm a digital innovation manager. If you check out my social profile, you'll see I also describe myself as an innovation strategist, design thinker, and a futurist in training. People who know me know I'm also an entrepreneur, a mentor, a Toastmaster, and a coach trainee. In my creative life, I play steel pan, I'm a writer, I do poetry, and I'm a photographer. For those people more interested in my internal workings, I am an introvert, I'm an INFP, I am a Scorpio, and I'm firstborn in my family. And on top of all of that, I'm a 40 plus single woman. All of those are labels and categories, and categorization is one of the most fundamental cognitive abilities that humans have. It's how we've survived. So we've evolved to categorize things and everything around us. Learning that animals with claws and teeth were likely to kill and eat us kept us safe. So categorization is really deeply innate to how humans think. But we also categorize people. So even when we're not in danger, we still categorize all of the people we interact with. And we start to put them into groups based on different criteria. It could be race, ethnicity, gender, age. We categorize people by school they went to activities they participate in. That whole list and history that I have, is how we categorize people. When we do categorize people, what we start to do though is we lose information because we minimize the differences that we see within a group and we exaggerate the differences between groups. And we start to do things like stereotyping. So this is where we associate certain traits with an entire group of people. So we generalize. And these can be both positive and negative. The other thing that starts to happen is when we categorize people, we start to create hierarchies. So we position the groups in relation to each other. By default, hierarchies aren't necessarily bad, but they can, of course, lead to tensions and stratification, which we're all familiar with. This is something that starts as children, right? When we're kids, we start categorizing to understand the world around us. And then we get categorized. We start hearing which one is the good kid, the tough kid, the easy kid, the athlete. And whether you want to call them categories or labels, they're really boxes. We get put into boxes from we are very young. And we stay in boxes because this is how we think, this is how we work. And we understand the negative effects of these boxes and these categories on a large scale. So we definitely see when negative stereotypes, start to cause tensions between nationalities. We see where the stratification in society causes racial tensions and discrimination. But we don't recognize all of the problems because when we start naming and labeling, we negate the fact that things are always changing, right? This is part of life. Life is ever changing. It's never static. But we define ourselves by attributes and character traits. We start to tell ourselves that we can't be anything other than what we've been labeled as. So I told you I'm an introvert. I am an introvert. That's how I use energy. I get drained by being in social situations. Does that mean that defines the way that I act and the way that I behave? Not necessarily. And so we limit ourselves. We put ourselves in these boxes and use them to define how we act, how we behave, how we present to the world. We tell ourselves that we do or don't do certain things, that we can't. We identify that we must or we have to act a certain way. And then we tell ourselves that, in describing ourselves to others, we say, I am this or I am not that. And just a few examples. I've been known to say I don't speak in public, yet here I am. So obviously not a true sentence. People will talk about, they can't talk to strangers. They say they have to get married by a certain age, or they're not a numbers person. And what we're really doing is we are putting these limits and restraints on ourselves. When we tell ourselves that we don't do something, we're defining ourselves by our activities. When we describe ourselves as and say we can't perform a certain activity, we're suggesting that our abilities are fixed, that we can't learn to do something. When we say I have to, we're binding ourselves to values and norms, usually that are passed to us from outside. And when we declare that I am not this kind of person, what we're really doing is stating an immutable essence. We are saying that it cannot be changed. Richard Bach said, argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours. And this shows up in that job that you didn't apply for because you didn't think you could get it. In the opportunity you didn't go after because you thought you're not the kind of person who does that, who goes after those things. For the chance that you didn't take because you don't do that, you don't take chances. And for those challenges that you didn't step up to because you didn't think you were capable. I want to share some stories with you of times that I've stepped out of my box. Every time I talk about my career in tech, it's always funny to me because I did not go to universities intending to study technology. I really went planning to do actuarial science. I loved math, I was good at it, and that seemed like a really easy way to have a secure future. But I took a chance on a computer studies major. It was far less familiar, and I really had never thought about a career in technology. But here we are 20-something years later, and it's led to an entire career that I could never have imagined. Staying home is the easy path. Stick to tried and true, the comfort zone where friends and family are. And that's what I could have done. But several years ago, I took the opportunity to take part in a startup accelerator in Italy for 6 months. And this was a life-changing experience. I now have entrepreneurial friends all over the world. And I learned so much about myself and startups and entrepreneurship. And I saw parts of Europe that I really never would have visited otherwise. And then jobs. With a tech career, most people around me, they really stuck to, you were either in software or you were in networking and administration. So I could have stuck to what I knew, even though I wasn't really loving it. I actually had considered leaving technology altogether. But I applied for a job as a startup program manager, and I ended up managing a Caribbean-wide tech startup program, which led me to discover that I had a real passion for entrepreneurship and innovation and working with startups and entrepreneurs. And that has led to several challenges that I have risen to. I took a job after that startup program in corporate innovation, and I've now been leading digital innovation for a financial group here in Jamaica for the last 3 years. And I've been working on things around design thinking and changing mindsets to build an innovation culture and being a major part of our digital transformation team, turning this 140 plus year old institution into a modern and dynamic group. In the summer of 2019, I broke my leg, and I broke it pretty badly. And then I had complications. So what should have been 3 months of recovery, a little time on crutches, and then hopping and skipping back to normal, turned into a year before I could comfortably drive, before I could move back to my apartment on the second story. And lots and lots of physio. But a year after my last surgery, February 12th was the anniversary of my final surgery. I was not only back to normal, but I was even stronger than before and physically transformed because I rose to that challenge. And I've spent the last 5-6 months working really, really hard and spending lots of time in the gym just to try and get myself beyond that place. And if you had asked me a year ago, I really couldn't imagine what the next year of challenge was going to look like. And then public speaking. I mentioned this one before. I have had terrible stage fright since I was about 12 years old. And I have clearly risen to that challenge. I'm now speaking at international conferences, speaking in front of audiences large and small. And it has been a long journey, and I continue to challenge myself with it. But I know that it's not easy. We face pressure from all around, starting with our families. They help to define who we are as children, and they're the ones that place a lot of those initial labels and limits on us. But then the groups and communities that we're a part of, the organizations that we join, they all contribute as we start to define ourselves more and more as we grow up into what kind of people are we. And then the society and the world around us, they impose values and norms about the way that we should behave and the way that we should act and how we should present ourselves. And now we're all facing what is probably one of the greatest pressures we've ever experienced, COVID-19. This came along last year and completely changed the way the world around us worked. And a lot of people have found themselves paralyzed and scared. They're afraid to take chances right now. They're afraid to do anything new because they really just want to wait and see. Wait until COVID has passed. Wait until the world is back to normal. But what COVID has done is it's brought an opportunity. It's given us a chance to reevaluate. We can take a step back and start to look at all of these beliefs that we have. I shared before how these limiting beliefs constrain us, these boxes that we put ourselves in, defining ourselves by what we do and our abilities and the values and norms around us. But in the middle of this pandemic, what we really have is a chance to completely unconstrain ourselves. Instead of defining ourselves by what we do, we can reconsider what we actually do. You don't have to stay in the field you've always been in. You don't have to do the things you've always done. Instead of believing that your abilities are fixed, you can learn to do new things. A lot of people have taken this opportunity to take up new hobbies, new interests, new passions. So consider learning something that you always thought you could never do. Instead of being bound by values and norms, we have the opportunity to create new norms. We're seeing a lot of that in the workplace with remote working. We're now seeing events that have had to transition to online. So we can also create new personal norms for ourselves. And instead of defining ourselves as immutable and unchangeable, now is a time when we can actually redefine who we are. I'm going to share with you 3 tips for how you can actually start to get yourself out of these boxes, to challenge some of these limiting beliefs that you have. We're going to look at awareness, empowering beliefs, and then evidence of success. So the first thing is you want to become aware of your limiting beliefs. An easy way to start identifying them is look at some of the current situations that you're in and how they're limiting you, how they're holding you back. Because most likely underneath that is a limiting belief that is telling you you can't do something or you're not the kind of person who does that. Then you want to dig into it. What is lying underneath that belief? Is it something that you were perhaps told to believe as a child or even as an adult, told that you were a certain kind of person who does things a particular way? Or are you perhaps basing it on an experience that you had in the past? Once you've identified the root and the source of these beliefs, you can now start to recognize that they're not true. If you were told to believe something by somebody else, that's their opinion. That's based on their own beliefs and their own perceptions. If you're basing your limiting belief on an experience that you had, that may have been just one experience. One experience does not make an absolute truth. So recognizing that the belief is not true is going to allow you to start challenging it and creating new empowering beliefs. What you want to do is replace the belief that you have, the one that's limiting you and holding you back, with an enabling belief. Start telling yourself, I can do this. I can learn this. I can be this kind of person. I am this kind of person. Start changing who that person is. But be realistic. I did not wake up overnight and tell myself that I am a world-class public speaker on a level with Oprah and Barack Obama. But I did start telling myself that I do speak in front of audiences. They may be small audiences, but they've gotten larger. And so you also want to think about, what will that belief help you think and help you do? Telling myself that I do speak in front of audiences made me start getting more comfortable with the idea of giving a presentation or joining a panel discussion. Once you've started to get that belief in your head, you can now start to build up the evidence of success. Your brain needs to see that these beliefs are possible, that they are real. So you can start by acting as if the belief were true, because that's an easy place to start. Just tell yourself, you're just going to do it and act as if you are that kind of person. This is something that you do. And start with small actions. Don't come right out of the gate with the largest mountain of an obstacle that you could imagine. But start with something small. If you've been telling yourself all this time that you can't talk to strangers, find ways to just start saying something small to a stranger, a neighbor you don't know, someone you see in the supermarket. And each and every time you say something to someone you don't know, you can affirm that success. That's one more time that you have done it. How can you say, I can't talk to strangers, when you just spoke to a stranger? And the more you do it, the bigger the efforts you'll make. And you want to keep going until you're comfortable in that new belief, until your brain finds it absolutely ridiculous to suggest that this is something you're not capable of, because you're doing it and you're doing it all the time. My invitation to you is to consider the possibilities. If you break out of these boxes, if you start to change these beliefs, these limits that you've placed on yourself, who could you actually be? Where could you go in the world? What could you achieve? What things have you not done that you could now achieve? Who is there that you could help? And what difference could you make? And even bigger, how could you change the world? There are things that you have yet to do because you've told yourself that you're not that kind of person, that this is not something you do, that this is not something you can do. So I invite you to stop boxing yourself in, step out of those boxes, change your beliefs, and start to accomplish some amazing things. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media platforms, because I would love to hear the beliefs that you've changed and what you've achieved since. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the rest of Techno Day.